Hello everyone and welcome to Scicomm Monday. I'm your host, Nicole Wood. For those of you who are new to the broadcast, we try to make this as engaging a platform as possible. So any questions you have, please feel free to submit them via the integrated chat module here on Periscope. If we don't get to your questions, or if you're watching this on replay afterwards, please submit your questions to us via our various Twitter handles. You can reach me at WildlifeBioGal or at the broadcast handle of Scicomm Monday. And I'm really excited about today's guest because she's definitely someone that I've been following along with on Twitter, and her really amazing job that she does on Instagram with her work. So Imogenes Cancellare goes by biologist Imo on Twitter, so you can reach her there. And with that, I'd like to welcome Imogene to the show. Thanks for coming on today.
Awesome. Hey, Nicole. Thanks so much for having me.
So why don't you just kind of give everyone a little bit of background of what the your work that you've done previously and what has led you up to all the amazing snow leopard work you're doing now.
Yeah, so my background is a little bit non-traditional. I am, by, I guess, definition, if you want to label me, I'm a wildlife biologist and conservationist. I started out a couple years ago, after I got my bachelor's degree in animal science. I realized that I was more interested in wildlife biology towards the end of my degree. So I started working as a research assistant on several different projects across the United States in an effort to get into graduate school. Graduate school in the field of wildlife biology, as most people know, or any graduate degree, is extremely competitive, and I really didn't have the background to set me up for a graduate assistantship or a funded project. So I basically lived out of my suitcase for about 2 years, working as a research assistant on primarily terrestrial mammal and terrestrial carnivore projects, basically doing data collection in the field, tracking bobcats, working with foxes, American black bears, wolverines, and clouded leopards through the Smithsonian. And all of those different field jobs made me a little bit more competitive for grad school because they built skills that I didn't get during my undergraduate degree. And I was really fortunate to be able to design my own master's project at West Texas A&M University, which focused on the landscape genetics of bobcats. And during my master's, which I completed at the end of, or in August of 2015, I focused on looking at population structure and landscape genetics for bobcats in western Texas. So fast forward to where I am now. I'm about to start the second year of my PhD at the University of Delaware, where I am focusing on the evolutionary history and contemporary genetic structure of the endangered snow leopard across Central Asia.
Neat.
So go ahead.
I said, yeah, that's really cool. Like I it's always interesting to hear some people's stories of, if they take time off in between undergrad and grad school and how well they can make that work for themselves. It's not if you don't get into grad school right away from your undergrad, that's not the end of the road necessarily.
No, and I worked for a year between my master's and starting my PhD. I accepted a really awesome job in South Carolina. It was a job for the University of Georgia called the Savannah River Ecology Lab, and I worked on salamander genetics for about a year. And I applied for tons of jobs. I interviewed for several positions. I interviewed for a couple PhD positions, and I came up short. I was like second place for 4 or 5 different things, which was a little disheartening, around this time last summer. So I just kind of decided to return to the, backpacking suitcase route, and I just drove up to California for the summer, and I worked for someone that I used to work with, but this time I worked under him with the United States Forest Service on a a marten project, which is a North American mustelid. And, did that for a couple months, and then I was fortunate enough to be able to interview for the position that I'm now in. So I think I'm a kind of a non-traditional example of getting to where, you are professionally, just because my bachelor's degree is in animal science, and it kind of took me, I took a year off between these two master's and bachelor PhD, and, did a lot of kind of, short-term jobs in between, but I've been really fortunate, so I'm really glad that I'm here, and now I'm getting ready to start this snow leopard project, which is super awesome.
Well, and I think, too, it gives you a real appreciation for when you go back to school, because I took time off, too, about a year and a half between when I finished my undergrad and when I jumped back into grad school, and it was a job that, while it was still in the sciences, wasn't necessarily what I wanted to do. I was working in a pharmaceutical lab, and definitely not anything to do with wildlife ecology, which is my love, but it really did give me much more of appreciation when I could get back to it and jump in, and it refreshed me as well as far as going back to schoolwork. It was a joy to sit through all of those lectures and to do the homework. It wasn't so much that drudgery of as you're finishing up your undergrad, you're like, can't this just be done? I don't want to be here anymore. It's like you have a real appreciation for it then, I think.
Yeah, definitely. I think for my bachelor's degree, and I get a lot of emails from high school students that are asking me questions like, oh, how can I be a wildlife biologist? I'm really interested in sharks, or I'm really interested in wolves, and how can I hone in on that particular career? And I think that enthusiasm is extremely important in our field. I'm sure you would agree with me on that. Is having like that love or that affinity for a particular task is important, but doing the legwork for a bachelor's degree that really sets up your skill set across a variety of different disciplines and taxes, really how you're able to get those jobs. And then once you're done with organic chemistry and the genetics, all those classes, then once you do your specific focus coursework for a master's or a PhD, I think it's a lot easier to make better grades. I mean, some people, making good grades is really easy. But for me as a bachelor's student, it wasn't as easy. But transitioning from a master's to a PhD has been easy because, the classes are awesome.
Yeah, I mean, that definitely does help too sometimes when you're able to start focusing in more on specialties that you really like. Taking chemistry was not necessarily the biggest joy of my life. I knew it was necessarily to understand the studies, but you're going to be more excited about the classes that you're interested in. So once you get to those master's and PhD level, it's more that focus area that you really like. So I think it's easier to get more excited about it too, and thus do better.
Exactly. And, the courses that I'm taking as a PhD student are super fun. I mean, my background for my master's is in landscape genetics, which is just as a brief definition, the combination of landscape ecology and population genetics. And those types of courses, landscape ecology and population genetics, aren't necessarily always offered at the bachelor's level. So being able to, take those as a master's student was really important. But, now that I'm a PhD student, I'm still taking classes because I'm adding new disciplines. My background up till now hasn't been particularly heavy in spatial modeling, but for my dissertation, I'm going to be using a lot of GIS and a lot of statistical methods for quantitative ecology to really kind of help quantify the genetic data that I'm going to be accumulating for this project. So, just kind of building on the skill set, which is obviously the goal of any degree, but building that so I can, hopefully be competitive for a job once I get the degree.
Right. So just a reminder to everyone out there, if you have questions for Imogene, please send them in via the integrated chat module, and we'll do our best to try to get those answered. So you're starting to talk about a few of the additional skill sets that you have to have as a biologist. What do you think is some of the most valuable things, being able to play in ArcGIS and things like that? What things have been super good for you as you have gotten to where you are right now?
So I think that one of the things, and I was really kind of resistant to this initially just because during my master's I never took a class on R, and R is, a software program that allows you to do a lot of statistical activities or a lot of statistical exercises for any type of discipline, but it works really well in ecology because you can, play with your data in a myriad of ways that is spatially meaningful. So I took my first R class last year, really loved it. It's, a lot of coding. It's, computer software. You have to be familiar with not only the statistical questions you're asking, but the actual coding itself. So if you're someone like me who has a hard time logging onto my Apple ID sometimes, this was a little bit of a disadvantage initially. But if you want to be a wildlife biologist, it's not just about going out in the field and collecting data or seeing wildlife. And I always try to tell people that. So like for me, my top recommendation would be to, get in a class that allows you to learn R, or you can learn it yourself. For me, a class is more beneficial. Some people are self-taught. Taking an R class is important. I think GIS is extremely important. There are classes in GIS, but both of the universities that I've been to, including the one that I'm at now, most people, they'll take a GIS class and they tend to think that you learn more doing it yourself. And I tend to think that's true. It's kind of like you hop onto that software and you just play with it and you do everything wrong until you figure it out. And I'm a big believer in that for GIS because that's how I learned. So R and GIS are very important. And one of the things, I've had conversations with people, and it seems like, we're so enthusiastic about natural history, but the farther we go in the field of wildlife biology, it's easy to get away from natural history because you're at a desk and you're, using statistics to answer ecological questions. And, a lot of like PhD dissertation defenses or seminar defenses or quantitative exams seem like they don't ask a lot of questions about natural history. And I think that it's extremely important for wildlife biologists, no matter what point you are in your career, is to really have a handle on natural history. So like I'm currently studying snow leopards, which is an endangered species in Central Asia, but most of my outreach online it really focuses on all taxa. I'm not necessarily an expert on every single thing that you might see online, but I like to learn about it beforehand because I really want to stay on my toes and be able to be, a really, I guess, a well-rounded wildlife biologist. Because unfortunately, even if you do love sharks or you do love wolves, like I just mentioned, it's really hard to find a position where you're just a wolf biologist or you're just a shark biologist. Yes, they obviously exist, but even a shark biologist or a wolf biologist doesn't only understand and learn about, that individual species. We have to understand how they interact on their landscape, what they interact with, what they eat, things like that. So, being up to date on like natural history is something else that I think is super important.
Right. Yeah, I completely agree with you on that. And right now I'm throwing up a screenshot of your Instagram account here where it's showcasing some of the species that you've been covering that are definitely, there's no snow leopards that I'm seeing in the first couple of pictures there. And I know it's helped inspire my Instagram of where I'm doing more of that natural history of just teaching like whatever animal I happen to come across with while I'm out in the woods or wherever it is I am, just throwing up a little bit of information to help educate everyone out there that I interact with on social media. And it also helps educate myself because like you said, we're not all experts on everything. And so it's a good way for us to continue to learn about all these amazing animals as well.
Exactly. And I think, I think conservation efforts start at the local level. And it's really, people are always asking, like, how can I help tiger conservation or how can I help snow leopard conservation? And that's a complex question that's in some ways difficult to answer because I'm here in Delaware or, someone else is in somewhere Ohio. And, we're talking about a species that's on the other side of the world, on the other side of a big pond. So how do you do things that are meaningful? And starting at the local level, I think, is really important. So like whether it's like learning about toads that you might see in your backyard or what plants, you can put in your backyard to attract native pollinators. I think that, starting small and working your way outward is how you have the best impact because, everything everything in terms of everything within an ecosystem is connected. So, I can definitely talk about how you can help snow leopard conservation, but, starting small and working your way bigger to have kind of like a global impact, is kind of my goal online. And also knowledge is power. And who doesn't like salamanders? So, if I see one, I'm going to take a picture and I want to talk to you about it. So it's just kind of like a multi-tiered effort that stems from the fact that I can't leave things alone and I, want to talk about them and learn about them.
Yeah, no, it's a great thing. So like what things have you done on Instagram that you found have been really successful and what things just really haven't worked for you? And then like also some other platforms too that you're involved with.
Yeah, so I was really pumped when Instagram started letting you do videos because I thought those would be massively popular. And it really, I found that it depends on the video, the length of the video, and the content. I've had, some of my most popular posts are little videos, but I think in the long term, what seems to get the most attention, long term as well as like within 24 hours of me posting something, are actually like well well-crafted photographs. Those seem to respond better. Videos are fantastic. I try to, put interactive videos on my Instagram and link those to Twitter, of course. But it seems like the majority of the things that respond well are just photos of like a really grumpy toad or a photograph of me holding an animal with a description. One thing that I always recommend, regardless of what you do online, is to put a detailed description. Twitter is fantastic because it's very like instantaneous. It's, almost like live streaming in a way. It's kind of like being in a live conversation, which is great, but, there are certain times of the day, every day, that I can't be on Twitter, so I'll miss conversations because I'm in class or I'm teaching or, I'm doing field work or sleeping. And, I can't.
We're allowed to sleep in biology?
Yeah. If my advisor is listening to this, I never sleep.
Right.
But, like you miss conversations, so it can definitely feel like yelling into an empty room sometimes. And I'm not knocking Twitter. I'm just saying, like, those are some of the things. If you're not there, you can miss important things. The benefit of Instagram is it's kind of easier to scroll through and find a photo, which is the start of a conversation. And you're also not limited to 140 characters as you are on Twitter. So for me, I like to include detailed descriptions. I think the things that perform best, you introduce the species. Like if I have a photo of, a butterfly on Instagram, I'll introduce the species. Usually I say where it ranges, something unique about it, whether it's an interesting fact about their diet, their color morphology, etc. And then I close with, I found this animal when, or I was doing this research when. And I always close it out with, at the end of this photo, this animal was released. It wasn't harmed. I always add that on there if the animal is anesthetized, just because you don't want someone to think that you're holding an animal that is dead or that you've killed it for your outreach efforts. So I try to, kind of cover all of my bases, and those end up sometimes being rather lengthy descriptions. And I try, I shorten them as much as possible so I don't lose people and say, well, she's written like 7,000 paragraphs. We're going to stop reading now.
Right.
But those are the photos that seem to respond the best. And, my social media online is mostly centered on just the actual natural history conservation facts. I occasionally put little tidbits about like my personal life or just, something that's not involving wildlife on there, but I generally stick to those types of posts. But I always try to add a little bit of personal humor on there, just so it's, like we're having a conversation. I'm not lecturing the reader. We're having a conversation. I'm sharing something I'm excited about. And those are the posts that tend, to perform well. And like for me, I'm on the East Coast, so I'm in EST. I think the photos that, like when I post at noon every day, like between noon and 1 o'clock, those are when I get the most attention. So that's, I found what works with me, and then I have time to go back within like 1 or 2 days whenever that photo is like popular and answer questions about it if people, decide to comment on them.
Right. So when you're handling animals and stuff, I know you put like the disclaimer in there to say like nothing has been harmed. Have you gotten any flack from anybody, even with having that there, of putting, because that was one of the things we talked about at the conference I was at this past week. I was at the American Ornithological and Canadian Society of Ornithologists conference this past week. And that was one of the things we were discussing, because we hosted a Scicomm symposium as well as a Scicomm roundtable, was the images that you put up. How, like, are you very careful with making sure that the animals pictures that you put up, like, it doesn't look like they're, beat up too bad, like their hair, the fur isn't ruffled too much, or other things? Are there other little tricks that you try to do to make sure that it looks like the animal is, being well cared for? I mean, we all know that it is, but sometimes to the society it might not look that way. And then have you gotten any feedback?
Yeah, and you have to do that. I mean, I've been in like labs and stuff where people don't want anything posted online, like, the photo of you holding, a critter. Even if it's totally healthy, they don't want that on there because of issues with organizations that are very anti-wildlife interactions, or any, I'm not, without naming them, there are organizations that are, will use that against anti-hunting organizations or any kind of any entity that doesn't like you interact with wildlife. So, I've worked in labs where that is not the case. Where I am now, and all the things that I post online, I have approval either from like the university or the person I've worked under if I'm not, the lead researcher, which I've worked on a lot of projects. So there are a lot of cases of things that you see online where it's with research that I'm not in charge, or stuff that I found on my own. First of all, I never handle anything if I'm not certified or vaccinated to do it. That's just for my own personal health. You make sure you have the permits. I'm not going to, pick up a species that I'm legally not allowed to hold. Like, you won't catch me holding songbirds and posting them online unless it was for a research project, because that violates, the Migratory Bird Treaty Act. You can't handle anything, you can't keep anything. So I'm really careful about that. But yeah, I have received a couple inquiries here and there, and that has helped tailor what I write on Instagram. So, I'll post, first of all, this animal is alive. It was anesthetized just like humans are in any kind of human surgery. It was monitored, its heart rate, its breathing, its respiratory rate, and its body temperature was monitored. It recovered for this long, and then it was released without harm. The photo was only taken when it was being put back into the trap to recover. Mostly because you see a picture of someone holding something, it can look like a trophy photo. And, half the time with the mammals at least that I work with, their eyes are wide open, their tongues are hanging out. So it's not, I'm not going to post a photo in which the animal looks kind of, compromising in that way. So I've gotten questions from people. Usually they're comments on the photo, so they're public comments like, oh, what are you doing? Is the animal alive? Are you certified for that? Did you give the vaccination? Do you have the rabies vaccination yourself? And I usually always answer them. I usually always wear gloves for most of the species that I work with. Mammals, and you're handling them because of zoonotic diseases, we always wear gloves. So you won't see hardly any photos of me online with an animal when I'm not wearing gloves, because I'm always wearing gloves when I work with them. With reptiles and amphibians, you don't always have to have the gloves. But I recently was contacted by somebody making an inquiry about wearing gloves when I was handling a tortoise. I would answer their questions and then directed them on to the lab that I was working on because they had more questions. So stuff like that. Yeah, I try to post, be as clear as possible, but also kind of succinct, and you have to especially, I think, be available to answer questions for that, so you appear transparent. Because if you don't, if people go to that photo and they see that the question's not answered, I think that you lose credibility.
Right. Yeah. Exactly. And it is so easy to misconstrue a photo, because like sometimes I find that people are like, they'll just look at the first thing and not actually read the comments that are associated with said photo, and they'll take it out of context, and then all of a sudden it just could possibly blow up in your face. And so trying to like figure out ways to do that. Like, have you ever like thought about, and like, because I'm curious, like with doing it myself, of actually putting something on the image itself to state like that this is, a research project and this animal isn't harmed. So it's on the image, and then also in the comments maybe explaining what it is that you were doing with that particular species.
I haven't done that, and it would be interesting to see if you get either more traffic or the same amount of traffic. Mm-hmm. I used to put watermarks, or not like I put like @biologist Imogene on Instagram over top of the photo, kind of so it wouldn't, couldn't be stolen or misused.
Right. Yeah, like I just had one of my pictures from the conference this week stolen by someone else's Twitter account that was completely not associated with the conference at all, and I was like, oh, they got a picture of the same meal that I had. Oh, wait, that's my picture.
Oh, man. So. Yeah, I stopped adding the watermarks because I couldn't find, and this is maybe just me, I couldn't find a software that I really liked that wouldn't degrade the photo on Instagram. But that's also because I was doing it like from my phone at the time, and I wasn't like investing hours and hours like editing the photo originally like on my computer and then transferring it to Instagram that way. But I'm sure there are ones out there that exist. If I'm going to post something like that, I'll post it in my, I'll take the post from Instagram that I put like on my feed, and I'll screenshot it and I'll put it on my Instagram story. And then you can kind of like make flashy captions that pop up that way.
Which I really loved when you did that with the Scicomm Monday promo. I was like, that's just amazing. That's so cool. But it just kind of like jazzes it up just that little bit more, that like really grabs people's attention.
It does, and I stole that from another Scicomm recently. Because I follow, her name is Science Sam on Instagram. So shout out to Sam. But she does it all the time. I'm like, you're so awesome. It's like next level. Like I'm super excited because I don't know what's coming next. So it's just another thing that seems to kind of like increase traffic to the actual post. But it's also fun. So yeah, I think that's probably what I would stick to doing to make the photos like more dynamic. And then like, a lot of people say they like the long descriptions. So, for me, it seems to work. But it also depends. I mean, like in science communication, I feel like the problem that you have is like finding that balance between fact, it's correct information, like it's factually correct, but it's also engaging enough to satisfy that, instantaneous or it provides instantaneous satisfaction. So you kind of have to, finding the happy place for that, I think is the challenge in science communication because, like certain part, I think a lot of people think, oh, science, how can you gussy it up to make it super exciting? So if you follow me, I'll tell you. But trying to find that happy medium between like long enough that it's descriptive and short enough that people aren't like bored, is kind of the thing that I think I'm still optimizing on my own social media.
Yeah, do you think it helps like being involved with different platforms so then you're able to do like that long form with Instagram, but when you want to do that short stuff you just throw it on Twitter? Or do you kind of find yourself maybe like as you're getting more involved with science communication that you're just kind of floating more towards one particular platform? Because I know like I started doing Snapchat and some other things, and it's just like I finally have like I'm kind of getting to the point where I'm like decompressing and like doing like canceling off all the things I'm not super involved with to focus on other things, say like Periscope and.
Yeah, man, like there are so many things. There are just so many things coming at you online. I think it's really easy to kind of to get saturated and to lose your voice if you're doing too many things. So I started out on Instagram. I've had Twitter for a long time, and only in the last like I don't know, like 15, 16 months have I been really active. So I've gleaned a lot. I've earned a lot of followers in the last 16 months by being more active. But I guess I have more success on Instagram. That's really like my platform where I'm, more well known. So, for me, like I don't have time to try to do Snapchat. I have a Snapchat, but I only use it to send like goofy photos to like 3 people. Right. You know what I mean? So like I don't use that one for outreach. I think Instagram is phenomenal because you reach a larger audience of more diverse ages. And, a lot of young people, like my little sister is 21, she has a Twitter, but she's not on it very much. So like, it's like science communication, in some ways might not be as successful on Twitter with non-scientists as it is on Instagram, or at least in my experience. And I get emails all the time from young people that are high school age, and that seems that, some of my branding really appeals to that age group. And Instagram is the best way to do that. I mean, there are a lot of photographers on Instagram that photograph wildlife, and their photos are so much better than mine. And some of them have like a lot more followers than me, and some of them have less. And I think part of that depends on how descriptive they are and how much information they provide to make it like an interactive experience. So for me, I'm not just like, these aren't usually photography quality photos that I'm posting because I'm not trying to share a product that I've created. I'm trying to share information. Right. So like granted, you do still need good photos, and I need to up, I'm always thinking I should up my game and always use like my real, like my Canon camera versus my phone. But I think that like for me, sticking to Instagram and Twitter has been really successful. However, that being said, this week I realized that in order to make your Instagram like a business profile, you have to have like a Facebook webpage. And I'd stayed away from a Facebook webpage for a while because I feel like it's just spreading myself too thin. Because I have my website, which is biologistimaging.com. Definitely go check it out, as well as Instagram and Twitter. But you can get a lot of really cool stats on Instagram. Like you can track how popular your posts are, how many people visit it within 24 hours, how many likes you have. So I'm going to try to level up and take it to that next step, and minimally manage Facebook page, and in order to basically perform better on Instagram. But for now I've got Instagram, Twitter, and then I've got my website, which I have a blog under. So that's like all I got time for.
Yeah, I've got a Facebook page now too, just so I could be able to put things out on Facebook and share it around there, but without necessarily having to share my Facebook profile, because I didn't want to make that public. I wanted to keep that for just family and friends. And I've got my Wildlife Bio Gal Facebook page, which has been nice, but it is more minimally managed. You'll find me more on Instagram, and then obviously, of course, Twitter. We all know I'm a little crazy with that. So
that's okay. That's good. I mean, it works. Like the squeaky wheel gets the attention, and people seem to like it. So yeah, I'm about to hop onto the Facebook page world, but you can mostly find me on Instagram and Twitter, and then there's like my blog, and I have like an interactive resource page on my website that seems to be helpful for younger people that are interested in a career in wildlife biology.
Great. Well, just a reminder for everyone out there, we're talking with Imogene about her science communication and also her work with snow leopards. So if you have any questions, feel free to submit them now via the integrated chat module. So we really haven't talked too much about your snow leopard work. So if you want to like dive a little bit more into that and tell us, what some of the issues are with snow leopards, because maybe not everyone out there knows that they are, have, some issues with their status as far as, population levels, and then what you're doing to actually study them.
Snow leopards are awesome. That's the short of it. But the longer issue, or I guess to kind of dive into briefly their natural history, ecology, and status, the snow leopard is one of 5 Cancellare species. So it shares an evolutionary history with the tiger, the leopard, the jaguar, and the lion. It's the smallest of those species. It is, as you might imagine, it's a white leopard. With awesome, gray rosette spots. It persists across 12 different countries in Central Asia. It is a true habitat specialist. It's called the snow leopard because it lives in what we call sky islands. So it lives at the top of the mountain ranges in Central Asia in very high elevation habitat, very steep, rocky slopes. They're prey specialists as well, so they basically exist where you'll find argali, markhor, blue ibex. They are listed as endangered, and they're endangered in all 12 countries. They're anywhere from 4 to 7, 8,000 snow leopards range wide across all 12 countries. There's been a lot of research done on snow leopards over the last 30 years. However, with that being said, there's so much that we don't know about the species. And that's really that's really just for one reason. They live at the roof of the world, and they live in places that humans physically cannot get to. They're very rare and they're very elusive, as you might imagine, for any wild felid. So when you combine both of those, the result is a huge paucity of information across every single discipline. Genetics is one way that you can gather a lot of information about any species of wildlife. Genetics is one of the important components for maintaining biodiversity, and it's a great way to do non-invasive research. So I'm doing snow leopard research, but I'm not going out there and capturing them. Unfortunately, I'm not going out there and collaring individuals. What I am picking up, however, is I'm picking up their scat, which in layman's terms is poop. So I am a
#science poop.
#science poop. I am a biologist. I work with cat poop for my degree. What we're doing is we are collecting scat from as many places as possible range wide, and we're extracting DNA from those fecal samples, and then I am going to use that data to do a lot of different things. So when I said that there's a huge paucity of information, I mean that there's so much that we don't know. We don't understand like the basic metapopulation structure of snow leopards in any country. We don't understand really how diverse their populations are. We don't understand their population structure. We also don't understand anything about their evolutionary history. Like, how are they structured on landscapes? How has that changed across time? And how might that change in the future in the face of something, say, like climate change? And as you can imagine, as a snow habitat specialist, climate change might negatively impact the species. So I'm kind of tackling all of those questions for my dissertation research. I'm really interested in describing their evolutionary, their historic genetic structure. So back to what I said at the beginning of the talk, I'm going to also be looking at using landscape genetics. So I'll be combining landscape ecology and population genetics at different scales to describe basic snow leopard population structure, comparing that with historic population structure. I'll be describing where their populations are, if those populations persist on important or previously identified conservation units for snow leopards. I'll be looking at specific habitat variables like snowpack, temperature, slope grade, tree line, distance to tree line, water. All of those factors can actually impact the population structure of a population. So basically what it boils down to in layman's terms is that, the study of, population structure using genetics is effectively looking at movement long term. You're looking at movement of individuals across generations, across landscapes. And everything ultimately is going to be a function of scale. So you've got a species that lives in its home range, and then you've got a species within its population, and then within its distribution. So I'm kind of taking all of that and trying to tie it up in a pretty project to look at their movement across landscapes, across time, to kind of see what's meaningful, what's functionally relevant for this species, and then use those results to better inform within country snow leopard management, as well as like transboundary across country conservation efforts, because they're in Central Asia. This species persists in areas of political hostility in certain in many parts of the world. So conservation efforts in one country don't necessarily mean anything for conservation efforts in another country. So you've got things like climate change and the illegal not the illegal pet trade, but the illegal pet trade or the illegal fur trade going on, trying to figure out where snow leopards are inhabiting the landscape is really important. So trying to do all that. I guess I could one run-on sentence forever.
No, you did good, because I had questions popping up and you totally were answering them as I was thinking, because one of my questions was, since they're spread across those 4 countries, how well do they actually work together to manage this species? And like you said, they could be hostile to each other, and so that's maybe something that's more on the lower term priority of those countries to work with each other on that.
Yeah, and there's currently a snow leopard meeting going on in I can't remember, it's in Bishkek. Going on with a bunch of different global leaders in snow leopard conservation that are meeting up to, tackle some of the issues in snow leopard conservation. It's leaders of these big organizations like Cancellare, Snow Leopard Conservancy, within country government organizations that work together to accomplish conservation objectives. And, so there is a lot of collaboration, but there's also a lot of overlap between different research objectives. And there's, like I said, a lot of gaps. So, I'm fortunate to be able to work with a lot of different organizations and a lot of different individuals to kind of collaborate, put all of our heads together, combine our powers to, try to answer conservation questions in a meaningful way, which, is super exciting. So it's a great time. It's a good time to be a snow leopard biologist, or, I guess to be a budding snow leopard biologist, tackling all of these really interesting, cross-discipline questions for this species.
Yeah, so another question I had too was, so you're working with Scat. How easy is it to go out there and collect Scat of a species that is so elusive like the snow leopard?
It's not. So my advisor's master's research was on snow leopards in Kyrgyzstan, and they're out there tracking, they're putting up camera traps for snow leopards, and they're also collecting genetic data as well. Most of the research that has been most of the projects that have been done, like with Cancellare, which is an organization that I work with, have been collecting Scat opportunistically, regardless of what the project objective is, which is really beneficial for me, because that means that I already have access to a lot of samples, which are going to be for my research. So I'll be going overseas next summer, maybe early 2018, into the field, probably onto the Tibetan Plateau in China, to start tackling sample acquisition in that part of the world. But to answer your question, it's not really easy, because they're rare, they're low density, range wide, and they live in areas that are sometimes hard for us to access. Panthera and a lot of other organizations and independent researchers do have camera traps in parts of the world, so they know certain areas where snow leopards persist, but there are other areas that we don't know. So it's kind of literally finding a needle in a haystack. There are other efforts going on that involve using Scat dogs to track them. Once you find a Scat sample, how do you know it is a snow leopard? They're often, there are distinct ways to identify cat from dog, or wild felid from wild canid Scat samples, but red fox samples are often confused for snow leopard samples. So if it looks like it could be from a mammal or a carnivore and it's not like a deer, it's usually picked up, and then we can test it in the lab to see if it actually is amplifying under species specific microsatellites, and then okay, hey, this is snow leopard. But it's hard. It does take a lot of work, and for most genetic studies, having a randomized sampling scheme is really important to being able to not have bias in your statistical analyses after the samples are processed. So having that kind of randomized, if you find it, great kind of attitude, is actually, it's beneficial, but it's also scientifically useful.
Right. So you're working with a species that's overseas. How much has that complicated your research versus doing a research project here in the U.S., which can sometimes be complicated enough getting all the permits and things that you need to be able to go out and start your research, much less when you're dealing with other countries and multiple countries, and it's halfway or really more than halfway around the other. It is on the other side of the world. So
yeah, it's definitely been interesting for me, to tackle this project. I'm really glad that I didn't do an international project for my master's, just because a master's is generally 2 years or 2 to 3 years. And, as a master's student, you're learning the scientific process. It would have been kind of taxing, I think, to learn both the scientific process, learn how to do science, do the science, and then deal with overseas, efforts in the process. So for me, kind of having that, the background of understanding how science works is really important, because it is time consuming. I think the longest, there are two different things that I would say that are like relevant to my project being overseas, is that it takes time to get permits. It takes time to build those collaborations. It takes time to actually plan an expedition to go over there and get samples. And not every country in Central Asia will allow you to export the Scat samples. So certain things have to be processed in country. So I can take the results with me, but I can't actually physically take the Scat sample with me. So working around that is just kind of another level of organization, because I have to plan my schedule, and therefore down the road the sample analyses based on what I can access and when. Because some countries I could go there 5 times during this dissertation research. Other countries I might only be able to go there once. So playing around with your schedule with those things in mind are particularly important. It's obviously an endangered species. There's more paperwork involved with working with that species or collecting samples from that species than it would be for like a bobcat, which is what I did during my master's. So it's definitely more time consuming. That being said, it is really rewarding, because it develops a lot of skill sets that I would not have necessarily developed otherwise. I mean, I collaborate with a lot of agencies for my master's, and I love bobcats. That's a different conversation. I do love bobcats, and I love working with United States like state agencies and like federal agencies. There are a lot of great people that you can learn from, and I've been fortunate to like work with them and work for them for research. So like that's hugely beneficial. But taking it to a different level, like with the international research, you get to meet like you get to talk to universities in other countries, and you learn skill sets. You learn skill sets from people that are going into that are attending institutions in another country, which is super cool, because it just makes you more well-rounded, and I think it makes you a better scientist long run. So for me, like at the end of the degree, I'll be able to hopefully do both, or do either one, in country, out of country well.
Yeah, I think you make a really good point there, being well-rounded. That's one of the things I like about being involved with Scicomm on Twitter, is it exposes me to so many different people, different cultures, and different ways of doing things that really has helped educate me. Like I grew up as a military brat, so I grew up all over, so I was exposed to a lot of different people coming from different areas of the greater United States, and I know that how much more well-rounded I felt when we retired back to my parents' hometown, which is a very small town here in Michigan. And I feel like Twitter has done that again, of where it's like really helped me to learn, because I know there's things that maybe I have slight biases things, or maybe just stuff I just don't even know about to know any better, and so being exposed to that really does help me. And I like that too, like with science, the greater community, you are constantly learning, and not just within the science itself, but also how to be a better person too, I think is also a good benefit with something like your international project there.
Absolutely. And I think I don't know. I mean, like, I think that I try, one of the things that I've learned a lot about in my, actions in Twitter is being more inclusive and paying attention to like microaggressions for, minority communities, and, kind of combating that or speaking out against it is something that I've really kind of tackled as something that, well, I mean, it's obviously important, and, like, I don't deserve a pat on the back because I've tackled it, but it's something that I've tried to make on the forefront of my efforts. And, working internationally is, being around anybody that's not from where you are just opens up your eyes. Like I grew up in a rural community, in North Carolina, and very rural and in a lot of ways narrow-minded and close-minded. So the more you do, and the more places you go, obviously widens that mindset. And for me, like it just opens up so many opportunities for like understanding and learning. And like you said, I do think being a better person. So I will amend my answer to your earlier question of what do you think is important in like learning in science, and learning how to be a better person is one of those things that I'm always working on and trying to do. So.
Yeah, you made a very good point about inclusion. The conference I just came from, they actually had for the first time ever LGBTQ social which was really good to see, to have them like help make sure that everyone felt included and welcomed. And the success of it was so amazing. It was great. It was very well attended, because I was doing the social media for the conference, so I was there covering it, and just getting to talk to the people who were there, like how much it meant to them to be part of like the official program of the society. Like it just really hit home with them that they were welcomed. And it's just like, you couldn't help, like, I mean, there's not a lot of things that I'll get like teary-eyed and like super moved about, but like that, like walking away from that and going, to other events of the conference, you just kind of like, it just really hit home like how much it means to people to feel welcome and be a part of something. It just, wow. So
exactly. Like, no. And I think it's, like we have a problem in science, like in, all disciplines, that you have, you've got your archetype of a scientist, which is like a white male, and then you've got other, capital O. Right. And,
yes.
Like I'm a Caucasian woman, so like, I'm a woman, so that makes me one type of minority, but that's not even remotely compared, to being like a woman of color or a person of color. And, for me, like social media and like working on this project, I don't know, I guess it's kind of like not changed my mind, but it's helped me understand the importance of listening.
Mm-hmm.
I like to think we're a good listener and we're nice, but you don't, you practice. Like you always need to practice, and you can always, be a better person. Like listening. Not every conversation is something that I need to lead. Not every conversation is meant for me. Not even something I should participate in. Sometimes it's just a matter of sitting down and listening. And I think, that's extremely important. And, I think I'm going to have the opportunity to do that during this dissertation research, which is something that, I want to be better at. And that's something that I think that Twitter excels at. Instagram, maybe not so much, or at least maybe I'm not tapped into the audiences that focus on inclusivity, but like including that in science communication efforts is something that I've seen really, really intensely on Twitter across disciplines. So, talking about, being inclusive as a wildlife biologist is just as important as talking about being inclusive in your hometown, when you're in the grocery store, if you're a chemist, whatever, the field might be, because we don't have, enough opportunities for people that don't fit some classic, archetype. So, I like to be, I guess, a source, or at least, I don't want to say a source because I don't want to like take ownership of it.
Right, no, I get where you're going with it though. It's, you want to be able to help be supportive of it, and yeah.
Exactly. And like one of the things that I've got your email for it, is I really want to do on my website is start like this women in wildlife feature. I mean, it kind of like that. I got the idea from like someone on Twitter talking about papers that are published by women in wildlife. And then there's like, like, what is it? Mattel put out like Scientist Barbie. And it's like, this blonde lady with like a mini skirt and high heels and a lab coat, and she's somehow a scientist. And first of all, that's wrong. And second of all, that, basically says a scientist has to look a certain way, which is obviously not the case.
Yeah, that was the thing I liked about that hashtag a while ago that David and others had like kicked off, where it was really showing all the amazing different ways that scientists looked when they're, out and about actually doing their science.
Exactly. And, like one of the things, like, I can be a good listener, and I try to advertise for a lot of things, but one of the things that I also try to do online is really focus on, like careers in wildlife biology. And, I'm a woman, so I can talk about careers in wildlife biology. Like, yes, I'm a female scientist, but I'm just a scientist. Mm-hmm. So like I've started this thing, and, it'll probably be on my website within like a month. I'm featuring, I want to do like a women in wildlife, like once a week, where you post like where I'm going to post like a short interview, photographs, like links to social media, websites of women that are doing wildlife research. So like it'll be, cross disciplines, across taxa, like this is what women in wildlife look like. It's not, obviously like, there are lots of great, awesome men in wildlife. So it's not, I don't mean any kind of gender bias by it, but I am trying to promote women in science, because it's just, one way to show that you've got so many women coming up doing great things. And, I really want to, I try to think about young women in the way, like I think about myself when I think about young women, and think about how like I didn't see anybody that looked like me. I had no idea that watching frogs metamorphose all summer was actually something you could do for a career. I just thought that was like my weird thing as, a 12-year-old. But, like trying to represent like, I don't know anything about swans, but you do. So right. Like, let's talk about it. Like, teach me about it. You know what I mean?
Yeah, exactly. I'm going to do a quick shout because we had someone popping in from Delaware there. So hello back there to someone else from Delaware watching in. Appreciate you that you could chime in here. But yeah, like I think of my 7-year-old niece. I wonder if she didn't have an aunt who was involved with science and I didn't expose her to other scientists. Like she's gotten to hang out with folks like Jordan Rudder, who is really amazing ornithologist, just finished her master's and she got to hang out with her and, go birding and stuff like that. And my niece on like one of her first grade assignments said, I want to be a bird biologist. Would that have happened if she hadn't had that exposure and saw that other women are doing this and are able to rock it out? Like if she had been exposed to male ornithologist, would she have felt like that was something for her? I don't know. So
yeah, exactly. So trying to just add, be a voice, I think is something that I'm trying to do.
Right.
I'm always looking for, I'm obviously always looking for more ways. So as I find out what's more successful, I always try to share it online.
Yeah. And it's like you said, it's more listening. I know I can continue to grow with how I interact with people and everything. And so it's like, I'm always appreciative of when people can, point something out that maybe they feel like, something I said wasn't quite rubbing them the right way. I'd like to learn because I always want to make sure that everyone feels welcome and included. I would hate to find out that someone later on felt, just not quite a part of, whatever it is that, I was doing, whether it was a symposium, a talk, part of this broadcast right here, I would hate for, that person to walk away and just not feel like they were welcome here. Because I would know how much that would hurt me if I ever felt like that. So
exactly. And like every, the next comment that what I'm about to say really applies to different things. It applies to like social media and it also applies to like my career professionally. Twitter is a great place, and so is Instagram. If you engage with like your followers and like fellow scientists, you have an opportunity to communicate with them. And Twitter is a great place for like learning from your mistakes. Like say you tweet something or you say something, and it's like, oh hey, like someone else says, hey, that's not very sensitive, or that's that's harmful language, or you're forgetting about the this group or this person. Being able to say, hey, I'm sorry, hey, I'll do better, I think is really important in not only like being a better person, but also being a better science communicator. And I try to do that on Instagram as well as Twitter. And I've had to say sorry before, and I'm not, why would I try to hide that? Like you know what I mean? Like I don't really know how else to say, I don't know what else to say about that, other than I learned and I'm going to do better next time. And also,
I think that's all anyone can ask of anybody too, because there's no way that you could possibly know everything in the world that is going to be sensitive for somebody, because you just haven't been exposed to it until you get exposed to it for that first time. And we all are constantly learning. So like
exactly.
I for at least me personally, I never have an issue with someone if it's like the first time they've been exposed to something to like say, I'm sorry, I'm learning. I understand that because I am too.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And like online science communication fosters like independent research too. Like obviously it's a great place to ask questions. Like if you don't know something, ask me. Mm-hmm. Whether it has to do with like wildlife biology or any kind of like social issue, if I don't know, I'll direct you to someone who does know. And if I have a question for somebody that might be sensitive, it's a great place to ask those types of questions, but it also really makes you realize like how much research, you can do on your own, outside of that like social media bubble to learn and then be better informed in the future. And professionally, I found that type of success the same way as well. I mean, I'm really fortunate. I'm in an awesome lab. My advisor is great. He is really good about being able to answer those questions. Like I found that, if you're open and honest, like you find yourself in a receptive community, like that's really the best option. I mean, I had, bad experiences during my master's degree and had to, switch my advisor because I didn't really feel like I had that environment. But having that now is, I think, really important, like both personally and professionally, and be able to ask questions and be able to learn and be able to be inclusive, is important. Like in my life as a wildlife biologist, when I'm working as a mammalogy TA away from Twitter and Instagram, it's just as important as, what I do on Instagram. So I found parallels in both parts of my life that way. And that's definitely something that, I want to carry on in my dissertation research with snow leopards, just so I can, basically be in sponge mode. Like there's a lot I still need to learn. There's a lot that I'm going to be doing. So being receptive to that is, on a personal and professional level, I think is really important.
Yeah, no, I completely agree with everything you're saying there. And I'd love to continue this conversation because it is one that like I'm really like keen to always like learn more about and have more insights too. But unfortunately, we're just about out of time here. So, are there any last thoughts that you want to send out to everyone, whether it's about science communication, your research, being inclusive, or anything else that maybe we didn't cover that you'd like to just give a quick shout out to about?
Yeah, I think that if you are interested in like a career in wildlife biology or any career in science, finding someone online is actually a lot easier than you think. Scientists are just normal people. I sleep through my alarm occasionally and have to rush to work because I'm late, just like everybody else. I am easy to find online, and you can ask us questions. And online is a great resource for learning cool facts and also learning how to tailor your journey in a field like wildlife biology. So that would be the most important thing. Don't think that we're not out there, because we are.
Right. Well, I'd like to thank Imogene for being on. It was a real pleasure to talk to you. Definitely a lot of great topics covered that could use a lot more in-depth conversation. So hopefully maybe some people will take this as a springboard to continue on with things, and hopefully we'll get some more people on Instagram to do some science communication as well.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Nicole. This is awesome. Like, you have a great setup here, so I'm gonna have to take a leaf out of your book and try to carry the torch.
Sounds good. You lead the way on Twitter, or sorry, on Instagram, and I'll lead the way on Periscope, and together we'll all get it covered. So
perfect. Works for me.
Yep. So if you're watching this on replay, or just we're a little too shy to ask questions, and you want to ask questions afterwards, definitely feel free to talk to Imogene on Twitter at her handle, which is biologist Imo on there. And then if you want to ask any questions of the broadcast, feel free to contact me at Scicomm Monday, or at my personal handle of Wildlife BioGal. And then we also want to take a quick moment to send a big thank you to all the Patreon sponsors out there. You really help to keep this broadcast going, so we really appreciate your support. And if you liked what you saw today, please go visit our Patreon site. Any assistance that you can give to helping this broadcast to happen each week is definitely appreciated. Not only do we do these one-on-one interview styles like this, but we like to go out into the field and showcase our scientist research as it's happening live with our Fieldwork Live #Fieldwork Live series. And so that goes to help support us being able to get out there, and in theory we'd like to be able to do that with no cost to the scientist in the future. So anything you can help with that would be great. And then with that, I just want to say thank you to everyone for tuning in, and go out, explore, do some science, have some fun, and we'll see you on the next Scicomm Monday.